say we're not your tomato and sweet corn and lettuce mix kind of farm. We focus more on root crops, so like beets and carrots and potatoes and sweet potatoes.
The farm we are on currently has only been in operation for 3 seasons now in New York State. But my career started 12 or 13 years ago in the eastern part of Massachusetts. So similar to the region I'm in now, just a little bit of variance in temperature and season, but essentially the same. It wasn't a big jump. I really only moved 2 hours from where my old farm was.
So I've been living in New York for 7 to 8 years now. And I met Max a little over 2 years ago at a farmer's market. It was his first season farming. My first time working or interacting with the farmer's market culture. And now I have been working on a farm for 2 seasons.
All of my experience is kind of in the small to mid-scale farm scene, so people have always been kind of conscious of it, but we're also, because we are on this smaller scale, we're not, we don't have to face the same kind of realities about access to energy or environmental impact that a lot of larger scale producers do, just because we're not, we don't use as much fuel as they do because we're a smaller farm. So it's small farms that the ones that I learned how to grow on are changing, but becoming a little bit more advanced. There's actually a little bit more of a reliance on machinery on the mid-scale farms because it's the only way for us to remain competitive. But we're also seeing a big uptick in very small farms, or at least I've noticed it. The kind of 1/2 to 2 acre intensive hand scale farm that don't use a lot of machines or any machines. There's a lot more of those appearing, and I think part of it is people's desire to get away from using, non-sustainable resources.
I've mostly been dealing with water shortage the past couple of years, and rainfall, because there are people have wells and whatnot. But if you're talking in like a broader sense, then the fruit, people who grow fruit like apples, peaches, plums, they lost up to 90% of their crop this year because of a late frost. I think we're lucky because we get to protect our things and crop plan a little better, and we don't have that one crop that's outside no matter what. Like a tree, you can't do anything. It's
Number one issue is going to continue to be irregularity.
Yeah.
And not being able to plan on the farming, even when you could sort of predict loosely what the season was going to do, was still a dangerous business because you can't predict the weather. And now that is just being accentuated by the fact that it could be 90 degrees at the end of April, or it could still be winter. We could get nights in the mid-teens in mid-October, or we could get them in January. The season could be dramatically shorter or longer any given year, and that just, it puts such a spin on it that it's really, really hard as a grower to compensate for it.
I think it was the combination of a slightly bad year last year with, let's say, flea beetles, and then a really warm winter that didn't kill many of them off. And so we had these just masses of flea beetles, and they skeletonize plants. So broccoli, cabbage, arugula, radishes, anything in that family. Drier, hotter years.
Hot, dry years tend to
Bug pressure.
increase bug pressure
And then you have
overall,
wet.
and mild winters also help, just by a smaller percentage of the population that's overwintering in field edges and plant debris gets killed by cold.
But yeah, this year we saw a lot of animals on our farm, like many more deer, foxes, birds, I don't know, groundhogs, whatever, just much higher rate than usual. And people were saying because of the drought, they were just moving into wherever there was a pond, and so we saw some damage because of the small zoo we garnered.
I mean, like I said earlier, I mean one of the primary things that we've had to do in terms of adjusting for changing environments is variety changes and timing in our planting, and what we can expect when. A lot is in terms of changing techniques. There's not much we can do beyond selecting varieties and cultivars that are going to be more tolerant of whatever weather we think we're going to have to deal with. Still, a lot of it is guesswork. We in the Northeast are not. We'll see what happens. This obviously was a historic drought year for much of the Northeast, but we're still a fairly water-rich part of the country, so we haven't had to do any kind of adjustments in terms of our irrigation practices to accommodate it. How erratic the weather's become has changed a lot in just my career. When I first got started, it was still pretty easy. You were still able to plan on kind of a cool, wet spring, usually getting into the field around April. Cool, wet spring, hot, dry summer, plan to irrigate then, and then kind of a cold, wet fall, frost in by the middle of October, pretty regularly. And now that kind of stuff it's pretty much all out the window. You have almost no idea what's going to happen.
In a way, it's already starting. This year we saw one of the worst droughts through the state of Massachusetts. It rained twice this summer where we are. We were irrigating from June through September. We're lucky that we have a really deep well and a good water source. But we've known of farms that have gone out of business. Yields were down everywhere. Springs are weirder, and the fall either never gets there or it gets there really soon, or it's really hot and then it freezes and it snows, and it's all sort of uncertain. You don't know what to expect. Losing power on our farm would be bad. I mean, especially now, because we are a fall-centric farm, so we have most of our money comes in later in the year, and we have most of our crops are in storage throughout the winter. So that would mean a loss on things that we have harvested and washed and put away that we can't sell. Another way is power. I mean, we can't irrigate, we can't run a greenhouse, we don't have solar panels. It would just destroy.
It'd be with our current setup and the way we're aligned in an economic sense, it would be a disaster to lose power for an extended period of time. Or I mean, the significance of the local farm and food security is going to become more important, not less important. And if you were to go back 50 years ago, it was very important. Kind of before, or a little longer than 50 years, but before they started trucking crops from the south and the west, the local farm was really important to food security in a given region, and that is becoming more true as climate changes in California and as energy costs affect the feasibility of shipping. So the significance is going to, it's going to realize itself probably in the next 25 years, is my guess, not in the next 5 or 10 years. But you can already see a change.